as I mentioned, a lot of the times, like in society, it's a very common thing for women to have an abortion, but no one really talks about the anxiety that people go through, the suicidal thoughts that women experience, the resentment, the looking at themselves in a different way, being stuck. So it's like no one talks about that, and no one talks about the fact that women are suffering in silence. And so like that's my biggest thing, is making sure that no woman feels like she has to go through that journey alone, which is
What's up, beautiful people? Shell here over at A Radical Relationship, and we are back after a little minute with another Girls Like Me interview. Today, I am joined by Lauren, who I connected with a while back on social media. I think we may know some of the same women from Detroit. Got a chance to chat with her a little bit about her testimony and an organization that she runs, and really just felt, man, this is something that women need to hear. Like, this is real. This is a person in the flesh that you can identify who has walked through these experiences and really been able to make something great out of her previous experiences. So Lauren, would love to just get started with an introduction of yourself. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, what you do, and who you are.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Slade. I am 26 years old and I am from Detroit, Michigan. I am a business analyst. I work in the technology field, but I am also the founder of a nonprofit in the Metro Detroit area called Arukah. And Arukah is a nonprofit that helps women who have had abortion along their healing journey.
Yeah, I love that. So, tell me a little bit about growing up in Detroit and how that was for you. I have two friends that are from Detroit, and it's always great just hearing some of their background. So, would love to start there.
Yeah, I would say growing up in Detroit. So even though I've always lived in the city, I would say that my parents have always made an effort to have me, I would say, outside of the inner city for, certain reasons. And so it's like, I feel like I went to schools more like in the Ferndale area, so like suburban areas. So it allowed me to have more of a like diverse background, because I got to be around like, different individuals and just see things from a different point of view versus just, having to always be in the city. But then I also did have that city background as well. And I feel like people from Detroit have a lot of drive, and just we
Mhm.
love our city. So I would
Yeah.
say it definitely instilled that drive into me, and just like that confidence in being like a Black woman, because we have a lot of women from the city who are doing their thing.
Yeah.
Over the last few years, I feel like Detroit has just grown amazing. Like it just has just transformed from when I was younger, just like the downtown area. So there's like a lot of opportunities now. And I really love just like seeing women of color and just people of color being able to like capitalize off of those opportunities. But growing up in Detroit, it was just kind of like normal for me. But like, I know when I talk to people outside of Detroit, like they'll say little things about how I carry myself, or,
Mhm.
just the way I do certain things. And they're like, "Are you from Detroit?" Like, I remember I was at the airport and I was like, "Yeah, I'm going back to the city." And she was like, "Are you from Detroit? Like, y'all always say you're going back to the city." I'm like, "Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's the city." So I would just say, like, being in the city, you just have your own different like style, and you
Mm.
just get to be around so many creative people. And I would say that that's what I'm seeing now that I'm getting older, is the creativity among people within the city, from just like clothing lines to music artists to just and so many business minded people from like real estate
Yeah.
industry and architecture. So it's just so much creativity here. But like I said, I did have a combination of like growing up in the city, living in the city, but still also like having that like suburban background from as far as like my education and everything. So I feel like I have like
Okay.
best of both worlds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I love that because a lot of the times with people, it feels kind of like it's either or, like either you like truly from the city or you like kind of from the outskirts a little bit. So yeah, it's cool to hear you say like, man, I really feel like I got the best of both worlds in some aspects. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, let's go ahead and just like dive right in. Would love to have you give a general overview of your testimony, and then based on some of the things that you might share through that, we can dive in on some of the specifics of that. So let's start there.
Yeah, so you sent me over a few different notes. So I'm just going to be looking at my computer because I want to make sure I hit a few, different points that I have. But for my overall testimony, I would say that God met me before I knew I needed him. And I always tell people that. Like, I remember it was back in 2018. I was downtown at the Jazz Fest with my best friend. And my church at the time, they were out, passing out flyers because they were opening a location in the city, and they wanted to get more people to be able to have visibility on the church so that they would come to the church. So they like were handing out flyers. They handed me a flyer. And I remember I was like, no, like, I don't want to go to church. Like, I'm okay. And my best friend was like, we should really go. And I'm like, uh. So I have, grew up in the church until I was about 12 years old. So I've always been to like Baptist church. My grandparents had me in church, but it was never really like I really even understood what was going on. And I feel like when I would be in church, I would be like doodling or just like, not really there. So I wasn't really, I was just going versus actually
Mhm.
being involved in a relationship with God.
Mm.
But at the time that they handed me the flyer, I was like, okay, I'll just go because she wants to go. And I ended up like just falling in love with my church. Like, I love my pastor. And so that really ignited my journey with God. But even then, I was still like going to church, every single Sunday, but still doing what I wanted to do, not really submitting my life to Christ. But like I said, I feel like God knew that I was going to need him for a time in my life that like if I didn't have him, I wouldn't have made it. And so in 2019 is actually when my relationship with God started to become more intimate, because right around the time that I was supposed to be graduating college, I ended up finding out that I was pregnant. And so it was like so many different thoughts were going through my head from like, okay, this is like a few weeks before, it was like a few months before graduation. I don't have a job. I'm not married. I'm in a relationship that I don't know if I should even be in. And because, like I said, I had just started building my relationship with God, I didn't understand that regardless of the circumstance, regardless of what it looks like, that God will give me all that I need and he provides for me. So it was like I allowed myself to let fear overcome me, because I didn't know really who God was at that moment. And so I ended up deciding to have an abortion. And I would say that that was one of the hardest things that I've ever done, because I was always that little girl who like had, her little family and would like play video games and just build a family. And so like at the point that I chose to have an abortion, I felt like I had just, given all of that up, and I was experiencing so many different emotions. And I feel like a lot of the times, like people in society make having an abortion like such a common theme, but they don't really talk about the effects that it has on a woman. And even when you go through that process of, going wherever you decide to go to have your abortion, it's like they give you packets and videos, but it's like, who's really going to sit down in that moment and just decide to watch? Maybe some people do, but I know I didn't sit down and watch hours of videos and read all of these packets, because it was already something where I was like, you kind of just like, okay, I have to do this because I'm graduating college. I have no other choice. So I really wasn't looking to try to get all the information on it. You know what I mean? But even then, like after the abortion, I feel like they give you this like 1-800 number that you can call, but it's not personable at all. So it's kind of like you don't feel like you want to call the line because you don't even know who you're talking to. You know what I mean? You don't know if you're talking to someone who understands what you're going through or what you did go through, if their experience having an abortion. Like, you don't know the person at all. So that personable level is not there. So I would just feel like I felt like I was by myself. Like I didn't have anywhere to turn. I didn't have like any family that I could talk to. And even when I did talk to family, I wouldn't say I didn't have any I could talk to. I had family I could talk to, but I felt like no one understood where I was coming from. And it was just like, I had all these emotions with no outlet. So like I would feel angry, I felt depressed, I had resentment, I regretted, my decision. I felt like unforgiveness towards the person that I, conceived the child with. I felt unforgiveness towards myself. So it was just like so much going on at a time that was supposed to be like the happiest moment of my life because I was graduating college. And something about me that I'm actually overcoming now is that a lot of the times I just push through. So I'm like used to just pushing through things, like we got to get it done by any means necessary, regardless of how I feel. And so since I felt like that, because I was graduating college, I'm like, okay, well, I just got to get through this. So I was masking everything, pretending to be happy, really showing up at like numb. You know what I mean? Like I was going to my graduation party with a smile on my face, all these things. But on the inside, I just wasn't feeling anything. I felt numb. And I just remember like trying to do anything I could to just like take away the pain. So like I'm not even a person who really likes to go out like that. And if I do, I'm not like a heavy drinker, but I was like drinking, like just trying to, and I remember I went out, I was drinking so much. I got drunk, I got sick. And then I just knew like, this is not me. Like, this isn't even who I am. So I remember just being in church one time, just crying out to God and just saying, like, God, I need you. Like, I need you to meet me where I am. Like, I need you to get down in this dark place with me because you're the only one who can help me. And I just was crying in service. And I feel like after that moment, like, after that, I just spent like the entire year really trying to understand like who God is, like the forgiveness that's available through Christ, and understanding the future that He has for me, despite what I have done in my past, and really just taking the time to feel what I was going through, and versus trying to mask it, which led me to enrolling in therapy. And I would say that like therapy and building my relationship with God is something that really saved my life, because if not, I don't know where I would be. And so that is how Arukah ended up coming to life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have a hoodie by Preston Perry. That's the Jesus Plus Therapy hoodie, and it's like, can we get both? Can we get y'all to know and trust that we need both? Okay.
We need both. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So something that you said that caught my attention was that when you ended up pregnant, you were in this relationship that you didn't even know if you were supposed to be in. Can you think back to that time and tell us a little bit about what you think was keeping you there in a relationship that you weren't like completely sold on, or sold, was it?
Yeah, I would say the thing that kept me in it is because I didn't know what I didn't know. So I didn't know the kind of man that I should be dating. I didn't know the kind of woman that I should be to be dating the kind of man that I should be dating. And so it was like I had been dating the person since high school, and up until my journey with, until I started building my relationship with Christ, like we were good. But I would say the biggest thing is like at the time that I started building my relationship with Christ, they were a believer as well, but it wasn't like, that desire or that like yearning to really want to get to know God on a deeper level. And so we just started to be unequally yoked. And I would say like that was the biggest thing that caused the relationship to end. But I would say as far as staying in a situation that, well, I would say at the point that I knew I should leave was when I built my relationship with God, and I was like, well, I got to put God over everything, so I'm gonna have to leave this relationship. So I feel like that was the trigger. But like I said, not knowing what I deserve, not knowing the kind of woman I should be. Growing up, I would say that I had been around men who were cheating, and a lot of the time, the way that people would show me love is through like financial means, like materialistic things. So the person was doing that financially, they weren't cheating. And so it was like, at least I know. So that was like, okay, this person isn't cheating. They're taking care of me financially. So that's what I need. And I didn't understand more of the like spiritual aspect of it. So I would say a lack of knowledge is really what kept me there.
Okay. Yeah. Man, that's so good. I remember just a similar situation for me in college, and being in a relationship where like it wasn't really even about him. It was really about the fact that like I knew I was doing stuff that I didn't have no business doing because my grandma told me better. Like I know my grandma taught me better than this, but I keep running back. Okay, it's got a hold.
Yeah.
And so just feeling that conviction, being sexually involved prior to marriage. And I remember having that conversation with him, like, man, this is where I'm at with it. And he was like, love that for you. But as for me and my house, we gonna get it in. So I was
Yes,
like,
yes.
okay, maybe we can figure it out. So that wasn't even enough for me. I just had to try to work it out. It's possible. And so like I would end up coming back, coming back, coming back. And then it was at that point, it was kind of like, listen, I told you what was up, from his perspective. So like you
Yeah.
keep coming at me expecting that I'm gonna be different because you feel different, and it's not gonna happen. So, but the thing was that like he felt like it was fine that we didn't necessarily agree. That didn't have to mean the end of a relationship. But I'm like, that makes no sense. Like, you want sex, I don't want sex. Like, there
I
is
agree
no
with you.
compromise. Ain't no in between. You know what I'm saying?
For
So
sure.
that had to be one of those things where I'm just like, girl, it just is what it is. You just gonna have to accept that, like, you've wasted your time. Okay, you've wasted your time. All right.
It's a lot of time, but
We can't get that back, but we can learn from it and move on. So, man, I don't know what it is with us, and maybe it's just, being at that age and figuring out that it's just like sometimes they show you exactly what it is that you need to see, but we just have the fairy tale in mind, and we have the dream in mind, and we feel like perhaps it's going to be different for some reason or another, and we just keep wasting our time.
like, that's something that I actually talk to like my friends about often. And I think that it's a good and a bad thing because it's like you have to know, like you said, when somebody shows you who they are. But at the same time, it's like as women, we have that nurturing side. So a lot of the times that nurturing side starts to come out. And when it comes out for I wouldn't even say the wrong person because everything is a learning lesson, but for the situation that you should not be in for a turn, for the time that we are on this earth, with your person, we can sometimes turn it off
Mm,
and be like, okay, well, I'm never gonna, be nurturing towards anyone or treat anyone. And that's why a lot of times, you have women who are more masculine because they have been hurt or because they never had that nurturing when they were growing up. So all they knew is to like try to provide for themselves and work hard, 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 and do all these things versus being able to sit back and really be who you were created to be. And it's like, I always make sure I tell them, like, it's okay that you were like that for that person. Like, that's who you're supposed to be, but you should pay attention to those signs where it's like, this isn't the person for me. It doesn't make them a bad person, but they're just not the person for me. But I'm
mm.
not going to change who I am as a woman because of this experience.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's really good.
Yeah.
So, we've now heard about like the personal experience that kind of led to forming Aruka. So, would just love to hear more about how you were able to get that off the ground, how you're serving women through that organization, and any future vision that you feel like God has put on your heart for the organization.
Yeah, so I would say like the biggest thing that God has placed on my heart for Aruka is to provide a safe space for women who are hurting. As I mentioned, a lot of the times, like in society, it's a very common thing for women to have an abortion, but no one really talks about the anxiety that people go through, the suicidal thoughts that women experience, the resentment, the looking at themselves in a different way, being stuck. So it's like no one talks about that, and no one talks about the fact that women are suffering in silence. And so like that's my biggest thing, is making sure that no woman feels like she has to go through that journey alone, which is why, we point women to Christ, but we also have faith-based counselors who will help them with those practical ways to help them overcome the pain that they are facing. And what we really learned is by having our support groups. So we have virtual support groups, which allows us to reach women across the world. So it's not like we just focus on, helping women in the Detroit area. We've helped women in like Texas, we've helped women in Florida, Detroit. But those support groups really allow the women to be vulnerable because they have other women who they know have went through what they went through. So it's not like they're just talking to a stranger that tries to say like, oh yeah, I understand what you're going through, but they don't know what they're going through. And even some of our, the women that they work with have experienced that as well. And they're very transparent with, when they've experienced having an abortion. So that gives them more of a comfort level to really feel like, okay, I have another woman who understands what I'm going through. I see how God has healed her and restored her. And so I know this is possible for me. And so like that was always my like biggest driver, and like what keeps me going is I don't want any other women to experience what I went through or have to go down that path of trying to, self-medicate with things of the world when there, because I didn't know of other resources out there. So like that's really our main focus, is getting Arukah out so that women know that there is a safe space for them to come and talk about how they're feeling, and then end up, with that healing that they need, and understanding that God still has a future for them regardless of what they have been through. So I would say that is our like main focus on the like Arukah Restore side this year, is just to continue to reach more women, onboard more counselors to help the women. So that's really like our main focus this year.
I love that. Now you are running Arukah while also working a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
What's that balance like, and how are you doing them both?
I would say like prioritization is really big for me, like, understanding what my priorities are. But I have just been blessed to have a team. That was like something that I really wanted to do from the beginning when I built Arukah, is like have a team, because I tried to build Arukah in a way that would meet the life that I'm going towards. You know what I mean? Like one day I know I'm going to be a wife. I know I'm going to be a mom. And while God is my number one, Arukah is second. At the time that those seasons come, it's going to shift. And so I still wanted to make sure that what God has placed in my heart would still come to, fruition, and would continue on as I transition into those other seasons. So having that team has really helped that. And then even like when I went through so much stuff last year, Arukah was able to run successfully because I had my team. I had a God-fearing team who could cover me in prayer, but also show up and make sure that they were pouring into the women when I may not have been at my best. So really having that, like I said, having that team helps me to make sure that I can still focus on other areas of my life, knowing that I can trust them to continue with the day-to-day with Arukah, while I may focus on the strategy, or I may have, another project that I'm working on at work. But the biggest thing for me is prioritization, understanding what I should be working on next. Like I said, my team, but then also giving myself grace to understand that like stuff takes time, and I was watching something on Instagram, and I think he had said like a lot of the times we will look at somebody who's been doing something for 50 years, and we've only been doing it for 6 months. And we're like, oh my goodness, like they have like 100,000 followers. They have, converted all these clients, and I only have my 3 clients, and you've only been doing it for 6 months. And it's like, we have to fall in love with the process and be patient and know that God's timing is the best timing, because you can have those 100,000 people 6 months in, but then it's like you may not be able to really handle that. And really just, like I said, falling in love with the process, learning and growing, and knowing that it's going to happen when it's supposed to happen, is what's important to me. But understanding that I'm only one person, I can only do so much. And as long as every single day that I'm doing my best, and on the days I'm not doing my best, have grace for myself and understand that I'm human, is what allows me to, I would say, balance everything out.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that 100% as an entrepreneur and someone who works full time as well. There's always the renewing of the mind that has to happen. That's like, other people's process is not my process. Other people's
Mhm.
success doesn't say anything about my success.
Oh,
Just their failure doesn't say anything about my success. Like, their
yeah.
process, their journey does not inform anything about mine.
Yeah.
And also just wrestling through that, like feeling like you have to choose a lane, feeling like,
Yeah.
look, am I going to be committed over here? Am I going to be committed over here? Am I supposed to be doing both, or am I wasting my time doing one? So I've definitely had that as well. And for my entrepreneurial side of things, I work with a business coach, and she's always leveling me out that, like, great goals, great aspirations. But the reality is that, like, if God sent that number of clients right now, you would probably mishandle them because you have other commitments. So like, the reality is that that only sound good. Practically, that don't even work for you. And I'm like,
Right.
you're
That's true.
right, you're right.
Yeah. But it's good that you have those people that are around you that can like reinforce that into you, because you just made me think about that. Like with everything the women, I would have wanted to help more women last year, but like with everything that went on, it just would not have, like, their experience wouldn't have been good. So it's like, okay, we need to make sure that we're focused on the people that we're serving versus the numbers, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a word. Awesome. So, shifting back a little bit into your relationship with God,
Mhm.
how did you know that you gotten serious about God, and what changes were happening in your life to point to the fact that, like, okay, I'm really getting serious about this thing?
Yeah, I would say just really submitting my life to God as far